we have the author Mandy French, who wrote a book called Foster Kid to Executive. And so a few of us got together in the American Legion Department of Minnesota and wanted to talk with Mandy about the book and what the book meant to her to write. So given that there's four of us on, and there might be a fifth one, we'll see if the fifth one comes on or not, but let's do introductions. I'd like to start with Janet.
Hi everyone, my name is Janet Lorenzo. I'm the Assistant Department Service Officer with the American Legion Department of Minnesota. That job basically falls under the VA&R pillar, Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation. So we focus on anything that has to do with care and well-being of our veterans. That is close to heart for me because my education and background is in social work. So it hits home for me being able to do a head-to-toe, in and out type of deal with anything that have to do with veterans. I'm also part of many VA panels when we talk about opioid addiction or even sleep apnea. I mentioned the opioid addiction and then the aftermath of what that looks like. And I work closely with the VA patient advocate team. We work closely with Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, so both big VA and state VA. I'm also part of the Gambling Control Board. I'm the chair for the GCB, and then I'm also the Women Veterans Initiative chair as well. And then I'm also heavily involved with Beyond the Yellow Ribbon.
Whew. The American Legion is quite fortunate to have you. You have a wealth of experience. You're a veteran. You're a puppy lover. Thank you for taking time out. I do appreciate, because I know you are a busy human being. So thank you very much for being here. If I could jump over to Teresa for the next introductions.
Hi, my name is Teresa Ash. I am an Army veteran, and my 9 to 5 is I work for big VA. My pastime, everything else, I am in the American Legion. I've done many roles within the American Legion, and currently I am a mentor to many young Legionnaires and veterans moving up in the organization, and I lead the media and communications for the state of Minnesota American Legion, for all the social media and the new stuff that goes out.
Yeah, and you were the impetus for this podcast.
Well, I have known Mandy. She was actually one of my mentors.
Oh, wonderful. And with that beautiful lead in, Mandy.
Well, thank you, Kelley, so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of your podcast. As she said, my name is Mandy French. I am the author of Foster Kid to Executive. But in my full-time job, I am an executive at Big VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs here in the Phoenix Regional Office. But really, this book is about my journey from, growing up in the foster care system to becoming an executive, but really understanding what was the secret sauce that got me through those challenging times, that helped me go from the trauma that occurs for anybody who has grown up and aged out of the foster care system, and being able to really build an incredibly successful life, both personally and professionally. And so as I've moved into the second half of my life, I've really reflected on the blessings that I've had and how I've gotten to this place, and really reflected on the importance of instilling some of the knowledge and experiences that I've had on others who not are just in foster care, but anybody really in a transitioning portion of their life. You have choices, really being intentional about how you can move from your current circumstances into the circumstances that you desire is something that is attainable for everybody. And I think that that's really what I try to highlight in my book.
Thank you. The book was given to me, and Teresa, you read the book, or you knew Mandy, but you decided this needed to be talked about. Were there key elements of the book or about Mandy's story that you really wanted us to discuss this evening?
Well, and if I say this, I'm not a self-help book reader. So if you give me a self-help book, I'm not going to read it.
Mm-hmm.
But Mandy had reached out and she'd written this book and I ordered it. And I thought I'm going to read it for her and then I'll give my positive my feedback. And she knows I would be horrifically honest. And most self-help books have a tendency for me to be about unicorns and rainbows and everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be great. Do this step. And that's been my experience.
Yeah.
But when I read Mandy's book, my husband, we were on our way to a Legion function as I was reading it, and he had to stop at the dollar store so I could get highlighters because I started highlighting things in it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is real. This is not rainbows and unicorns. This is saying this is going to suck. This is going to be hard. But if you keep believing, you can get through it. And I'm like, I just kept highlighting. And before I was halfway done, I placed the order for all the other books so I could hand them out to the people who I thought would appreciate it, understand it, and be able to get what she's saying out to the world, because what she's saying, and it's how she's saying it, what she's saying, she's real. And it's like,
Mandy?
that's what did it.
I don't even like calling it a self-help book.
What did you think?
I've read a lot of books that have helped motivate me in life, and this is definitely one of them. So Mandy, I applaud you for a well-written book, but more importantly, this to me is a book that I would use as a stepping stone when someone is on their healing journey and ready to start the process for it. And I think the main reason why Teresa really likes this book is because the way that it's written speaks easily to her and all of the key elements that everyone looks for in a book that's focused on healing, but just getting down to the nitty-gritty basics of what we need to focus on instead of going into the larger aspect of it. When we're looking at deep-seated healing for Teresa, this is more so get to the point already. What do I need to do to fix whatever's going on with me? And you've named quite a few things in this book. My personal favorite, which will always be my personal favorite, is discipline. And being a kind of like a forever student, continuously learning, continuously growing, so that you don't feel stuck and reciting the same habits, the same history, the same cycle of trauma that got us here. And then it also gives you a breath of fresh air when you have your own children on what you're not going to do. And as we all know, grief comes in so many different stages. And I could tell by the time you were finished writing this book, it was almost like we felt some of the stages with you in this book, and it was very enlightening. It also brought back a few things that I went through when I was in the military, and then getting into the workforce and learning solid boundaries. So it helped bring a lot of different emotions out, and it also it's one of those books that you want to grab versus here, let me grab one of my books. But this one right here is more for the people who have done a good amount of healing already, and now they're ready to take it to the next level. Whereas your book, Mandy, is where everyone should start.
The framework.
And that's the thing, that when you asked about what my favorite part was, my favorite part was the part where you actually said, your choices are your responsibility. You actually said you are responsible for your decisions. It's not anybody else. And the people that you surround yourself with, those are also your choices. And you put accountability back on yourself. And that was huge to me. It's like most people say, okay, your parents got divorced, so that's why you're traumatized. Or this happened. No, you're a victim once. 10 years later, you can start to heal from it. And if you choose to not, that's on you. And that's where you put it. You made everybody be accountable.
And Kelley, you're kind of shaping the question of, who was this book really initially intended for? And I think that goes to what both Janet and Teresa just said is I really wanted to make this really easily digestible by anybody, but mostly somebody who's aging out of the foster care system. The statistics for somebody aging out of foster care, it's decimal. It's the 97% don't attend college. 70% of girls are pregnant by the time they're 21. Many don't graduate from high school. 20% become homeless instantaneously upon leaving the system. The programs and the structure and some of the safety nets have gotten better since I've aged out of the system, but the statistics really haven't gotten any better. And a lot of that has to do with kids. Kids don't feel heard and they don't feel like they have control over their circumstances. So when they feel like they can have control, it's oftentimes in spaces that they are making poor choices. And so I think that it's easy to be the victim and it's easy to blame everybody else when you just don't know what the right next thing is, or if you just can't hear the message. And so really by putting this book together, I wanted my reader, no matter the age, but really anybody, in a younger capacity to be able to embrace that ability that you are the decision and the leader of your life. You are going to be fully responsible for who you are and how your life turns out and nobody else. And if you can make good choices today and you can be intentional about the vision for what you want for the future, you have the ability to not be defined by today, but rather to work your way out of those circumstances and move towards a better tomorrow. And so I've read a lot of self-help books as well. And I find them oftentimes a little pie in the sky. They're either really pie in the sky, like, oh, that's great, that sounds wonderful, but not really realistic. They don't give you tools to really get from point A to point B. Or they're so scholarly that it's hard to really connect. And so I really wanted to write something that was easily digestible, could be read in small chunks, but really have impact. And more than that, I really wanted to be able to leave my reader with actual tools. And I really feel like the journey of the book. So it's a little bit cyclical. Anyways.
Cyclical.
Thank you. Cyclical. It wasn't coming out of my mouth. It's a bit cyclical in the sense that, I have the 6 secrets. So
can I stop you, Mandy?
Yep.
What does that word mean?
Cyclical. So kind of goes in a circle. So
repetitive, nothing changes, no point.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. If you had the question, somebody else probably does as well. So, but it's cyclical in nature in the sense that the 6 secrets, so foster kid to executive, 6 secrets to building a successful tomorrow. And the 6 secrets are really choices, mindset, effort, goals, relationships, and opportunity. And so when you start looking at all of those attributes, it's really circular in nature, and it starts with making a choice that you want a better tomorrow. And part of that is understanding what tomorrow do you want. If you don't know where you're going, it's hard to get there. And so half the battle is just writing down, what does life look like in its optimal state? And that doesn't mean that, you're going to get unicorns and rainbows in the future, but it does mean that it puts you on the path to start making choices that lead you in that direction. And life might nudge you in slightly different directions, but if you're making those positive choices, you have that mindset that allows you to be focused on the future, on that delayed gratification instead of the instantaneous now. You can start moving in that direction, and all of a sudden you'll wake up in a couple of years and be like, oh my gosh, you know what? Like I started at point A and I have traveled through point B, C, D, and E. And here I am on my journey. And you know what? Life isn't as bad as it used to be. It's not, I'm not dealing with some of the circumstances that you had before. Because oftentimes the circumstances that we're in, um, as kids, there's a lot of things outside of our control. There's lots of things in our control, but there's a lot of things outside of our control. And that's why it's so incredibly important that as you're starting to age out of the system, whether you're a foster kid or maybe you're maybe leaving the military, right? They're those life transitions really take intentional thought and decisive action in order for you to be able to move forward. And sometimes just getting in your own head and not having the mindset of being able to differentiate what you want from how you get there is sometimes very limiting. And so just being able to expand yourself and to understand that a step forward is a step in the right direction, and that you don't have to tackle the mountain all in one day, I think is so incredibly important. And I don't know if it was Janet or Teresa that said it, but it really starts in chapter 4. I talk about goals, paving the path. But what I really want folks to get out of that chapter is daily habits. We can talk about vision and long-term goals and even short-term goals, but really change and direction comes with what you do every single day. How you live your life every day is going to be a determiner on how you move forward and whether or not you're able to achieve your short-term goals and your long-term goals. And so, making small changes and adjustments little by little make really big impacts to the long-term trajectory of your path.
You're quite unique, Mandy. So often trauma can be the main identifier in which we identify with, and then that keeps us stuck, if you will. You start your book talking to the person, not the identifier. And you, throughout the book, focus in on the person as a valued human being, not necessarily the circumstances or the feelings. And then you weave in your book the very fact that these circumstances and these feelings are going to be a part of you. There's so many different occurrences that happen throughout our lives and feelings. We're in a culture where our feelings dictate our actions. Your book flips it.
I think it's so incredibly important to divorce your actions from your emotions. Our heads and our hearts are very tricky things, I think. And I think that it's our natural tendency, I think, especially in today's society, to really chew on our trauma, to really dissect it, to really try to heal from it. And I think that those are all, can be very healthy things. But like with anything, like healthy it can only be in so much quantity, right? And so understanding that those are things that have shaped who you are, but that they're not the label that you are, I think is so incredibly important. I talk about a story, and at 10 years old, it was pretty amazing that I was able to differentiate. But I talk about being on a swing on the side, on the back of our property, and my foster brother came up to me and another girl, and we were swinging. And I don't quite recall why he said it, but he was like, "You're just foster kids." And I just remember us just being so empowered and saying, no, that's not us. We're not jars. We're not labels. You don't have, you can't label us. And we were, swinging really high, and we were just kind of going back at him. And we weren't letting him define who we were as people and as human beings. And yes, we were both, young girls, put into a situation where we didn't have families, where we had to adapt to all sorts of different areas of society. We had to grow up as children. We very much became adults. But being able to realize in that moment that we could soar above our circumstances, that this boy telling us that we were just foster kids wasn't who we were. It was part of our story, but it wasn't who we were. And, I think that if you can divorce yourself from the things that have happened to you, so that you can use them to help others navigate through those territories at a later date, I think that is the power of going through hard times. It shapes who you are, and it allows you to come out stronger on the other side. So it's going to do one of two things. You're either going to wallow in the trauma and in the labels and in the victimization that you feel has set you back or not allowed you to reach your full potential. But those are all external factors. Those are all things coming at you. So I would come back to you and say, well, what are you doing? What is within your control to be able to define those circumstances, and to not let others define who you are? And I think that, really looking at it at the simple analogy of a jar and a label. Is that really who you are? Is a label on a jar? Absolutely not. You are so much more than that. And so being able to use those experiences to make you a better person instead of letting them define you and keep you from being the best version of yourself.
Yeah. Janet, you work with individuals each and every day that have traumatic experiences, or they find themselves in places where they didn't expect it. Is this a book that would be impactful for them? Because Mandy, you make us do a lot of homework in the book.
Yeah.
There's blank pages and we don't get to just read the book. You want us to do things in the book.
Yes, and in fact, I actually brought it with me to therapy one day, and it's looking at what's in your control and what's outside of your control.
Yeah.
Very powerful, very powerful area. And I do find myself quoting a lot of the same things that are being said today with a lot of the veterans I work with. And in fact, I used some of the techniques while I was right before we left to New Orleans for the National Convention. I had a vet call me and tell me, or excuse me, the other way around. I was following up with a vet to see how everything was going for him. And out of nowhere, he starts sobbing uncontrollably and told me that the phone call came just in time for him because he was about to go and self-harm. And I was just like, well, God's plan. All right, I guess we're doing this right now. So just went through some of the steps with him, and some of the areas that were very helpful for me. Quick guide is having the healthy lifestyle piece of it. And of course, what's in there? No alcohol, no drugs, no way of being able to alter your mindset, but instead just go through it. Go through whatever it is you're feeling right now and don't take a shortcut. Yeah. So that's essentially what I used with that veteran, and then tried to use it a couple times while I was in New Orleans too.
No, I appreciate that. Henry Nouwen is a deceased priest. He wrote a book called Wounded Healer, that we all have wounds in our life. What we do with them, we can expose them because it helps other people. And you were writing about that to some degree, that our wounds create compassion. If we choose to be compassionate from that, and we do have to do our own work and we do have to heal, the opportunity to be a compassionate human being to another being comes from suffering. Yeah. And it's what we do with our suffering that determines if we're going to be effective to other people or not.
And so very important, because I think that especially I think for people who experience a lot of trauma in different areas, a lot of times you look out and you think nobody else knows what I feel like. Nobody else has the trauma and the difficulties, the issues that I have, the lack of family, the lack of support, they don't understand what I've gone through. But the reality is that everybody has a story. Everybody does. Everybody has trauma. Everybody has a story. Some people look like they have less than others. But not only is it a perception thing, but it's also, I always like the saying, God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. And I think that when we when we come out on the other side of trauma, it's because we were able to handle it. And not everybody has the same tools to handle the trauma that you've gone through. And so recognizing that you have been able to survive those things is that you can then, to your point, you can help with that compassion, bring other people through those things. And that was a big part of my decision to write this book. I remember I got a scholarship through the Annexted Family Foundation to go to school to go to school. And a lot of people said, well, are you going to be a social worker? Like, don't you want to give back to the system? And I remember being like, heck no. I want to be as far away from the system as possible. I don't want to see a foster kid, a social worker, a foster parent. I don't want anything to do with anybody on Facebook. Well, there wasn't Facebook back then, but I don't want anything to do with any of that. I want a life completely divorced of my situation. And I'll tell you that trauma also creates shame. So for much of my adult life, my younger adult life anyways, I was very shameful of my circumstances. I didn't want people to know that I grew up in foster care. I didn't want people to know I didn't have a family. I didn't want people to know that, I was essentially homeless every 9 months. When I was, going on summer break for school, I had to figure out where I was going to live because I didn't have a family to go home to. Right. And so those are challenges that people in my circumstance go through. But even as a young adult, as a young professional in the VA, really being careful about who you tell about your life and how they might interpret who you are. And it wasn't until I became more of a division manager and started leading other leaders that I really was inspired to share more about who I was and how I came to where I was. Because I think it's so impactful as a leader to help the people that you are leading understand the lens in which you come at things. And I'm kind of an intense person. I'm very type A. I like things done a certain way. I have very high expectations for people. I want everybody to be the best version of themselves. And sometimes people see that as, especially as a female, some people, see that as being overly aggressive or being, having too high of expectations. And so when I share my story and I say, well, look, this is where I came from, and this is how I have gained my worldview and the hard work that I've put into the life that I've got. I think that we can work a little bit harder for the veterans that we serve, or I think that we can, do these things to become an even better organization or an even better team. And so that helped me in my journey as a leader to help people understand the lens in which I came through. And then I quickly learned how powerful that was, how powerful the story was to the people that I was leading. And then not only would I be sharing my story, but I would ask my leaders to share their story. And what I became very keenly aware of in that time is that common thread amongst leaders of adversity and overcoming. And I would say that 90% of the leaders that I work with, and the best leaders that I work with, have overcome some sort of adversity in some capacity that helps them contextualize the circumstances that they're in, that they've come through, and that they really appreciate the position and the place that they're in, and allows them to lead other people. And so that was kind of how this started to kind of cultivate in my mind, was, working with so many people and understanding the differences that we all have, but how that really comes back to how do we build a successful tomorrow, and how do we use those circumstances to launch us forward and not keep us down.
Mandy, towards the end of the book, you're not shy and you challenge people to forgive.
Yeah.
The ultimate act of releasing yourself from having what has been done to you in a powerless position free from informing who you are. I don't know if you want to share more about that.
Yeah, I talk in the book about my relationship specifically with my mom. But put whatever situation into that bucket.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is hard, and I think that it's really misinterpreted. I
It
think
is really hard to
oftentimes,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's misinterpreted because I think oftentimes we talk about forgiveness and we expect some reciprocation. We
Yep.
expect that somebody is going to acknowledge forgiveness, and then oftentimes forgiveness for people is somebody saying sorry to us. And
Yeah.
really, I challenge any of my readers, anybody who's listening to your podcast today, I challenge them to look at forgiveness from themselves and how they can forgive the people who have hurt them so that you can release yourself from that trauma and from that victimization. And you really, it really is a personal thing. And I read this in a book about looking at the person who hurt you, looking at them and visualizing them as a child, um, and looking at them through the eyes of compassion. We've talked a lot about compassion today, but looking at the person who has hurt you through the eyes of compassion and looking at them like a small child, because at one point
Yeah.
they too were innocent children and somebody hurt them.
Yeah.
Something happened to them that they hurt you. And so it was awful that that happened, but you have the ability to forgive and to break that cycle, and to recognize that hurt can stop with you, and that you can use that hurt as a launching pad to be able to help others or to move on and do other things. But forgiveness is really about releasing yourself from the trauma and the experiences that you've had, and being okay with the fact
Yeah.
that the person you're forgiving may never acknowledge that they were
Ever.
wrong, that they
Ever.
did something that
Yes.
wasn't right. You may not ever even know that person. In my circumstances, my mom has passed away, and I was lucky enough to be able to at a very young age come to a realization and to provide that forgiveness as she was dying. But even writing this book really brought up a lot of those feelings, and a lot of,
Oh,
how did
sure.
how did I manage through that, and what is true forgiveness. And so it really is about not letting others control you, because when you can't forgive others, really somebody's living rent free in your head.
What does forgiveness look like? Because forgiveness means so
Yeah.
many different things to so many different people. Is
Sure.
it saying, I forgive you for what you've done, I'm not going to hold a grudge anymore, or I forgive you and I can move on and I can love you? Or, I mean, there's so many different forms of types of forgiveness. Kelley, Janet, Mandy, if you could tell me, what does that look like to you? When you forgive
Wow.
somebody, what does that look like to you? Because
So
Yeah.
that's a hard thing. When you say forgive, I'm like, okay.
I think it's a great question, and I'm curious to hear what Kelley and Janet have to say. But for me, for me,
Janet, I could see Janet's mind. I don't know if you want to.
no, I'll say for me, and then I'll hand it
Yeah,
over to you guys.
yeah.
But
You
for
know,
me, it's about accepting. Oh,
Accepting.
accepting the circumstances, right? For me, it's about
Yeah.
accepting that these things have happened, and that I have the ability to move on, and that whether I had a role in
Yeah.
those things or not a role in those things, the past is the past, and I have to move forward. And so accepting the circumstances for what they are, good, bad, and different, whether I had a part in some of those things or I didn't. It's
Yeah.
about moving forward and being okay that those things happen, because those things make me who I am.
Yep. My father was a practicing alcoholic his whole adult life, or my whole life. And I was always curious on how he became that way. And I found out what had happened to him when he was just a child that traumatized him. And it kind of put a little framework for me. But the forgiveness for me was the process of very spiritual process of recognizing that we're connected as human beings. When there's an injustice that has happened, we know that in our soul. And that's where that harboring, the ill will, that the harm of being, how do I forgive? I need you to recognize that you have harmed me. If we weren't spiritual beings, we wouldn't care if there was a harm done. We would just see it as the normal carnal act that mammals do to one another, kill or be killed. But the very fact that we have a sense of injustice that is done to us, he never knew that I forgave him. But I had to come to the point where I had to release him and those injustices. And for me, it was, okay, Lord, I know that you can see this. He could live rent free, and all those instances could live rent free in my brain, and they paralyzed me. But the forgiveness, what it did for me is it allowed me to hear other people's pain in a way that I would not have been able to hear before. And then to connect on that and to sit with, not to commiserate, because we're not in a bar, we're not in a bar drinking and commiserating over each other's misery, but recognizing, like you had mentioned, Mandy, that you are a valued human being. And to me, that is a very spiritual statement. We would just wait for the food to come to us, or we would,
Exactly.
No,
Does
a very long time ago, I would have answered this. Not that long ago. Within the last few years, I would have answered this question very differently. That was before my healing journey. Before it was, we're done. You cross boundaries with me. I've asked you to stop doing this. You're dead to me now. I would do nothing to help this person. I would basically cut them off. My family would cut them off, because when we love in my family, you're basically in my inner circle here. That's how close I get to certain people, and that's why I have a very tight-knit group, and I keep them there. I don't let anyone else in, because it's difficult for me to trust anyone, because I don't know what their intentions are, or if they're going to disappoint me in the future. So I just tend to stick to the people who I know will not disappoint me. But that's also a trauma response. Sound familiar, Mandy?
Yes.
That's a trauma response. I intentionally do not let people in, because I know that they're going to disappoint me one way or another. The way I handle this now is I would like to give them that opportunity to get to know me better, because we all deserve that. Part of the networking piece that's in your book, Mandy. But also, I found a healthier way of letting go when someone has upset me. And it's not just like little things where I'm cutting people off. Obviously, no mature woman would ever cut somebody off for something so little. But for big deals that cut deep, those are parents, very close friends, sisters. It happens to all of us. We have somebody in our life that's very, very close. The only way that they can hurt us is because they held a certain amount of respect from us, and enjoyment or enlightenment, or they brought something positive into our life. And when they do something negative to take away from the positivity, that's very frustrating, especially if it was done in a malicious way. I've just decided, we'll just say in the last 6 months, that the closure is for me and not for the other person.
Okay.
I know what my part was in the whole framework of whatever broke down. I'll apologize for my piece of it, but then after that, I have to move on, because behaviors usually don't change after that. That person has to go to therapy or learn more about what it means to be a good friend or a good partner or a good brother, or whatever the case may be. That's on them now.
Yeah.
Now, if 10 years down the line, that person is still going to therapy, still doing their due diligence to grow, doing their due diligence to be a better version of themselves and not doing the same old song and dance that is cyclical, then I may decide to let that person back into my life, because that's not no longer the old person. That's a new person that has worked very hard to reinvent themselves and earn some level of trust back. Harboring the anger is just not going to get us anywhere. And I'd like to go to heaven one day, so that's my little piece of it.
Boundaries and forgiveness. Mandy, do you want to talk about that further? Because that's what, and I think that kind of gets at what Teresa's talking about, levels of forgiveness. Is it opening up your door and allowing all the people that have harmed you in the past to Thanksgiving dinner?
Yeah, and I think
It's going to be an interesting Thanksgiving dinner.
And I think it's through experiences, right? And I think that Janet, you just said it really beautifully, right? When people hurt us, it's easy to then take that experience and then put it on top of other people that didn't do those things to us. And so it's figuring out that right balance of letting people in and understanding that there's a season for every relationship. And it's a give and take, right? That season that you're in with one person, you're giving them something and you're taking something from them. And then that's what it should be. It should be a balanced approach in that relationship of give and take. But relationships are so incredibly important to our success. It's I always like to say, gather your 5 closest friends, and that is a reflection of who you are and who you're going to be. And if that is not who you want to be, then you need to find new friends. And so figuring out what boundaries you want to put in place with the relationships that you're in is incredibly important to how you're going to achieve the different circumstances that you want in the future. And again, it's about being intentional with your relationships. I think it's easy. It's easy to again use your labels to allow that to dictate who you are associating with. And so again, I always like to say, if you want to level up your life, level up your friends, right? And so if you want to level
Amen.
up, if you want to level up, you've got to look at who you are associating with. And so figuring out what your motivation is and surrounding yourself with those people is so incredibly important. And, I think this is, really poignant for addiction. People who have addictions oftentimes find themselves with people who maybe don't even have similar interests other than maybe the addiction. Right. And so, making sure that what the reason that you're associating with somebody is for health reasons, right? If your relationship is only as deep as alcohol or drugs, it's not a healthy relationship, point blank, right? What hobby? Yeah.
That's funny you mentioned that, because we have one of our vet buddies. He has been instrumental with the Veterans Restorative Justice Act. He has been instrumental with Vets Court here in Minnesota. He's been instrumental with suicide prevention. He is like literally a guardian angel to a lot of veterans. And what people don't know is he was at my house this weekend, this past Sunday, because he wanted to see what life looked like to have fun without any alcohol, without any substance. No cigarettes, no THC, no alcohol, no nothing. We're literally high on life, and that's all you get to have when you're at my household. And it took him a minute or two to realize that I wasn't joking about the fact that my house is a dry house. And if he was going to come over, he needed to live by our rules. We have Pepsi, we have water, we have milk. What do you want to drink? That's basically it. And by the time he left, he actually felt like he didn't want to leave, which was kind of enlightening as well. But we just sat and had a bonfire and talked for like 4 hours. And it was just really enlightening for him to see that there are people out there that don't have to partake in any sort of mind-altering drugs just to be able to enjoy life. Sitting and talking with your vet buddies is more than enough fun. Plus, it helped that we had a little workout this weekend with the color rock.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of physical activity in there this past weekend, and this friend was there. So now it's going to be a common goal that we try and get more exercise, like you said in the book, at least 30 minutes a day. If that should be a lot more than that, but I digress. But anyways, agreed. Find new friends, because if you are finding that you cannot socialize with anybody without having to deal with that demon constantly, find new friends.
And
Find
stay
new friends.
busy in a healthy way, right? If all you're doing is staying at home and watching TV, like your vice isn't necessarily a substance. It might be binge watching Netflix. It might be eating food. Whatever that vice is, it's keeping
Teresa,
you.
being a workaholic.
Yes, a workaholic. I was there. I talk about that a little bit in my book. I was a workaholic. So there's so many vices out there. And so really thinking about what are you doing to enjoy life and how are you using your time constructively? And what are our time is resources, right? So time is money, they say, right? And so if you're not getting anything in return for your time other than a hangover or no sleep because you're working all day and all night and all weekend, bringing joy to what it is that you're doing and finding things that bring you joy is so incredibly important to moving forward on that success. Because if you're finding activities that bring you joy, you're also finding people that like the activities that you like to do. And all of a sudden you're surrounding yourself with the people that you need in that season to be able to be the healthiest version of yourself.
Right. And in fact, I have a couple of my veterans that is working 2 or 3 jobs just to stay away from their normal crowd so that they don't go back to that lifestyle, which I don't usually push going from one addiction to another. We're not going from alcohol to being a workaholic unless you have a goal in place that you're only going to be doing this for the next 6 months to pay off some bills, to get some money in the bank, to be able to afford first and last month's rent, to get back on your feet, whatever the case may be. But there has to be some clear goal setting in place to figure out, when is this going to end? When am I going to be finished with this entire process here of letting go of my old life, trying to get into my new life? Otherwise, you're just stuck in another rat race. You're stuck in another wheel that you don't know when it's going to end, and what's the point in that as well. But that's the only time I would ever promote being a workaholic, is to change your lifestyle.
When I was in hospice, I watched human beings, become their diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then we start treating people like their diagnosis. Continuously iterate that in this book, that you're more than. Do not confine yourself. Get new friends. Try something different. If you need to get the break, which I hear people will do that, it's like, I need to get 2 to 3 jobs because it'll just give me that mental break. And the science behind all that will validate, what it takes to create a new habit and things of that nature. Do you go out on tours for your book, or is it on your website, which is mandyfrench.com, if I remember right? Yep. And so they can order it.
Yeah, so you can certainly order my book off of mandyfrench.com. I have done a couple of local book signings here in Phoenix, but definitely open to any conversations that anybody would like to have in regards to the book. But really, my purpose is about serving others, about taking opportunities like this to be able to spread awareness that this is an available resource. And it really is. It's more than just a book. It really is. I'm putting you to work. There's lots of resources in there. If you subscribe to my website, you can also get access to the Success Toolbox, which is many of the well, it's all of the worksheets and some on my website. They're a little prettier than they are in the book on the website, but it's just an opportunity to really take action on your life in any place that you're in, to be intentional about your choices, about your mindset, about how you're exerting yourself in a particular direction and putting the right milestones and things in place to be successful. And so I would just encourage folks to visit mandyfrench.com or Amazon to find Foster Kid to Executive, and here to help serve and encourage really anybody going through any transition in life. This has the ability to change the trajectory of your life, to help you move outside of your current circumstances and really launch yourself into the life that you deserve.
Mandy, one last quick thing before we finish up here. One thing I did not mention when I first met you, and I'm not sure if Teresa or Kelley even know this, but at one point I used to work with Child Protection Services. So I worked with a lot of foster kids. I worked with a lot of kids that had a really, really, really rough life, and I'm actually going to be gifting the book to one of my friends that is a senior social worker out of Dakota County, and she works with foster kids. And I think this is going to be a really great book for her to gift her kids that age out of foster care the same way you did. And it's actually a really great tool for them to utilize. So you're going to be changing more lives here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Minnesota girl at heart. I did grow up in Minnesota, and that's really what this is about. This is really about getting this book in the right hands of the right people, to give hope. I wish I had a roadmap when I was 16 to help me, get through. I mean, I'm lucky to be where I'm at. I had a lot of self-intuition, a lot of really great mentors along the way. But the reality is that once you have this knowledge, you no longer are ignorant. You now have the tools to make the choice. It's now your choice to either move forward or to stay where you're at. And that's hard because it's a mindset shift. You have to put in the effort. None of this was easy getting to where I am at today, but that hard work makes it so much sweeter. It makes the life so much more gratifying when you know that you've worked so hard to get it.
Yeah. Is it chance prefers prepared mind or luck prefers a prepared mind? One of those two. That kept going through my head when I'm reading the book, is like, you really have to be prepared for when that opportunity presents itself.
It's really, you're 100%. Like if I talk about, getting a scholarship to school, right? I was a foster kid. Had I not been making all of the decisions up to the point of being a senior in high school, right, to do my homework, get good grades, I wouldn't have gotten this scholarship to a 4-year private liberal arts school, Gustavus. I mean, you can be awarded something, but if you haven't done the work to prepare yourself to get that opportunity, you're never going to be able to launch yourself forward. So it really is, it's about making the choices today to prepare yourself for opportunity that you don't even know is there yet. And I know that's a hard conceptual thing to understand, but if you're not investing in yourself, people aren't willing to invest in you. And so I would say that, there's infinite amount of opportunity in the universe. And you just have to attract the right energy to yourself. And a part of attracting that energy is preparing yourself for the life that you want. So if you want a certain lifestyle and you want to get there, then you need to figure out who you can emulate. What are the right decisions that you need to be making to get you to those spaces? And then when you start moving in those directions, even just baby steps, we're not climbing mountains in a moment, just baby steps in the right direction, they add up. And that investment in yourself will allow others to want to invest in you, and that opportunity will attract itself to you.
Sounds like retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and your book serves in some capacity as the coach or the mentor to get you going until you can connect with another person that might want to mentor you further or coach you along, or in a counseling situation, or in a closed group or an open group, some kind of a small group. This could be 6 sessions is perfect for a small group setting. And then the homework gives you enough conversations. So if young people, I found it very helpful for young people, and young people younger than myself, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think I might be the oldest one here. And so for people that are really wanting to strive and to work on and to transform, this book really lays it down and does not get you off the hook that you do have to do the work. And and here, by the way, I have put in 4 worksheets for you to get started right now.
Yeah.
Love that. And so in your book, it also, you have discounting pricing for if you buy a certain quantity, and you can buy up to 1,000 books. You're totally equipped to do that through Amazon or through Mandy French.
Yep. If you any bulk orders, you should come to me directly through mandyfrench.com,
Okay.
and that will allow me to connect with you directly. But through Amazon, you can only buy them one at a time, so not as advantageous.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does anybody, I always give the last word to the guest, and I'm going to put that as Mandy, Teresa or Janet.
I just want to say thank you, Mandy. And I want to say thank you to Kelley and Janet, because it's about, for me, it's about God putting things into place at the right time. And for me, I know this book is going to spread through Minnesota, because it's the right people in the right place in the right time. And this book needs to get out there to so many people. And with this podcast that Kelley has been doing for me, for our team, has been amazing. And Janet connecting with so many veterans in the communities and the families out there. I just, it was needed. This book is needed. And so thank you for taking the time to share your life and your experience with your book, Mandy. And Janet and Kelley, thank you for allowing us this platform.
Definitely. Janet.
I want to say congratulations. But I wanted to say a job well done on a lot of the decisions that you made in life, and being vulnerable enough to share your story, even though some of it was probably very difficult for you to self-disclose in this book. So I congratulate you for being vulnerable in your book, for using that vulnerability as a way to empower others. I congratulate you on your scholarship. That was pretty darn amazing. And I'm really hoping that when future foster kids read your book, they can think to themselves, that could be me one day. And, and also I congratulate you on changing your family tree. That is such a beautiful, big deal. Wonderful podcast. Thank you, Kelley, for doing this, by the way. But congratulations to you and your family for a future that wouldn't have been possible if you didn't make these changes in your life. And so congratulations.
Thank you for having this conversation today, and giving me this platform to share my book and to really talk through some of the incredible pieces of this book that really relate to so many different sectors of society, of life, of people that we know. And although it's easy to relate to foster kids as foster kid to executive, I really hope that for anybody, whether you're a foster kid, somebody transitioning into college, out of the military, or just plain stuck in the rut of your identity, that this book can help people really launch themselves to the next level so that they can get to places that they didn't know that they could get to. If you'd asked me 20 years ago that I would be sitting on a podcast today talking about a book that I published and sharing my life with the world in a very vulnerable, authentic, and raw fashion, I probably would have thought you were crazy. But here I am, and I just think that it's just a wonderful opportunity. I'm so incredibly so much gratitude for the opportunity to use this platform to launch this out into the world. And just really want to thank Teresa for picking up my book, reading it, reaching out, and then sharing it with others. And so I would just ask those who are listening today to take an opportunity to go to mandyfrench.com, go to Amazon, get your copy, but don't just stop there. Gift your copy to somebody else, or get a copy for somebody else that needs it, somebody who's stuck. It really is an easy 4-hour read. It's super digestible to read it chapter by chapter. And it really has the ability to change the trajectory of your life or the trajectory of somebody that you love. And so I just want you to take that opportunity to be able to make an impact. And that's really what my goal is to make impact, to change people's lives the way that my life has been changed through using these principles and applying them to what I do every single day. And that doesn't mean that I'm perfect or that things are easy. Just because I'm on the other side of things, it still takes a lot of work. It still takes a lot of effort. I still have goals. And so, it's cyclical. It's continuing to move on and move forward and keep going no matter the season of your life. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I am excited for this to continue to spread, and hopefully the Mandy French movement can be all over Minnesota before long.
Join the Mandy French movement. Thank you.